U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a new 10% duty on imports from all countries in a furious response to what he called a deeply disappointing Supreme Court ruling. The country's top court struck down Trump's so-called Liberation Day tariffs, saying he went beyond his authority in unilaterally imposing his signature trade policy. The defiant leader using a separate law to continue his global trade war.
Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122, over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies.
While several trade partners welcomed the court's decision, top U.S. officials are calling it lawless. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Mr. Trump had been stripped of his leverage and called on all countries to honor their trade agreements. The fate of more than $130 billion in tariffs now in a limbo, with the court unclear of what happens to the revenue already collected. Nick Harper, reporting for CNA, has more from outside the Supreme Court.
It's a ruling that limits presidential power, a rare rebuke for Donald Trump, with the Supreme Court telling him he overstepped his presidential power and reminding him that he should have got congressional approval. 6 out of the 9 justices voted against his tariffs and said that the president had tried to assert extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration and scope. Shortly after the opinion was handed down, the president spoke to reporters and lashed out at the 3 conservative justices who joined their 3 liberal counterparts to vote against his policy.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
So what now? Well, more tariffs. The president announcing on Friday a new 10% global across-the-board rate. That's on top of other country and sector-specific tariffs that still remain in place on things like steel, aluminium, pharmaceuticals and cars. And in theory, there's around $200 billion that now needs to be refunded to US consumers and companies, as well as foreign countries. Money that's been collected from people who've been burdened with higher costs as a result of those tariffs. Philip A. Luck is the director of the economics program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and served as the deputy chief economist at the US Department of State.
A lot of money is going to have to go back to Americans who paid these tariffs. That will take time, obviously, but we're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars that is owed back to the American people. That also means that hundreds of billions of dollars has been gained by the administration, and because the one beautiful bill actually increased the deficit quite a bit, which was largely honestly offset by the tariff revenue or the expected tariff revenue. That's more borrowing the U.S. government's going to have to do, or the administration and Congress are going to have to find another way to finance that through tax increases.
The court's decision may also affect some of the U.S. trade deals that have been negotiated in the last year. Remember, the president has used tariffs as leverage, threatening higher rates in order to win concessions. Some of those deals are now in doubt, like the US-EU deal, which may need to be renegotiated. And some countries may be left wondering whether they even got a good deal, like Japan, that said that it was going to invest billions of dollars in the United States in return for a lower tariff rate, a tariff rate that the Supreme Court has now ruled illegal. So a court decision to remove tariffs, a presidential decision to impose more tariffs, and consumers left in the middle wondering whether they'll ever get refunded for all those tariffs they paid for. For CNA, Nick Harper in Washington, D.C.
Washington's trading partners have welcomed the Supreme Court decision to strike down President Trump's sweeping global tariffs. The European Union said it is closely analyzing the ruling. Trade spokesman Olaf Gill says the bloc is now in contact with the U.S. administration for clarity on the next steps, while calling for stability and predictability in trade. Canada's International Trade Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, said the ruling reinforces Ottawa's position that the levies were unjustified. Mr. LeBlanc also noted Canada's steel, aluminum and automotive sectors still remain affected by sector-specific duties. Neighboring Mexico said it was studying the possible effects of the 10% general tariff that Mr. Trump announced after the court verdict. The country sends 80% of its exports to the U.S. The UK expects its privileged trading position with the U.S. to continue. The two countries signed a trade deal last May that lifted tariffs on UK steel and aluminum products and slashed levies on British car exports to 10% from 27.5%.